All right. So, how many of you guys are scared of this? There's some kind of inner fear or something stopping you from painting your miniatures. Maybe it's not fear. Maybe is it considered a chore by you? Is it something you're going to find repetitive and tedious? I have a way to paint miniatures that everybody else knows really, but I want to really emphasize, if you're afraid of painting your miniatures, don't leave them gray. You can do this thing that I do to the miniatures, and congratulations, they'll be just fine for tabletop usage. What you're going to need a primer. You're going to need a matte, often labeled as camouflage quality, but you can use anything that specifically says it's matte. Get a spray paint. Get one that's on the lighter side. The lighter the shade, the better. We're going to cover that in here in just a second. Also, it's a good idea to have matte spray seal, just in general, whether you're doing good quality fast work or if you're doing amazing long-term artistry style work with your miniatures. It doesn't matter. Having matte spray seal is actually a really good thing. That's because one of the items I'm going to talk about that you really do need tends to gloss up a bit, and that item is an ink or wash. They make plenty of them through the Army Painter brand. You can find plenty through Citadel Colors as well. Vallejo makes a ton. However, Contrast Paint from GW and the Speed Painter line from Army Painter, both of those are also usable and sometimes may even better be a choice for you if you want to pull off these techniques I'm going to show you today. By the way, it's always better when you're getting inks or the contrast paints and Speed Painter. For this technique I'm going to show you, make sure they're medium or darker paints. That's going to do a lot to make this technique that I'm going to show you really look good. So let me show you just the results I've gotten using this technique. Here I've actually painted, and I'll show you the stages I've went through to get this process to work. I just have 6 of some miniature I have super spares of in my collection. And I decided to just give them a yellowized paint job just to show you what was going on with this. First of all, you do have to prime them. A white primer, in my opinion, does work really the best because it's kind of like an artistic gesso. The white primer is actually really good to get the colors to stand out. You don't have to put it on thick at all. You can spray it lightly from one direction, spray it lightly from another direction, do 2 other directions if you really want to. This is the actual spray coat. This was a matte. This is actually the corn yellow that's made through Krylon. It's actually pretty decent color. It's one of the lighter colors I have, and that's why I used it. There are some more interesting colors that I use more often that I'm worried about running out of. That aside, this is a good idea for all of your spray base coats. Use a lighter color. Yellow is a good choice of a lighter color. So is a light blue, a light green, pink, sand color works really well. A very light green like a sage. A light gray may be cool also, but that's if you want your models to look gray. Like a technical look, like Battletech models, spaceships. Once I've sprayed this general color here, I went through and I actually picked out, and I use a detail brush for this. I went and picked out some things as a different color. The bow got turned into a sandy white. The katana got picked into a sandy white. The arrows on their back got turned into a sandy white. I could have gone through more picking and picked out more details, but that's what I chose to do. And also, let me tell you something about this process of picking things out. Metallic colors and colors that are slightly darker than what we have here is probably better for picking out during this phase. Also, if you're doing flesh colors, don't be afraid to put on a darker flesh tone because it serves as a background of what you're about to do next. This is the ink job. I went ahead and inked the sucker, and this I used speed paint from Army Painter. The Army Painter speed paints I'm going to point out as being technically possibly better than the contrast paints from GW. And it's because they're not as good. Yes, I said that. They're better for this technique because they're not as good as the contrast paints. I actually did my best to try to, shake these and make them go on evenly with an even coat. Notice how it kind of killed out all the things I took out. I used such a thicker version of the washover that I lost the color on my bow and arrow and on the flesh, really. I mean, look at it. It's not really there. It got sucked up by the contrast paint. So this stage, it's better to use a wash or an ink if you're really worried about the differences in your color showing through. If you're not so much, you can just blast it with a contrast paint or the speed painter, and that should do just fine. I then went through, and as you can see, I picked out the different colors. I went back over with the detail brush and pulled out the white from the katana. I dry brushed the bow and arrow, arrows included. And I picked out the face with, a lighter version of the face paint. And that's actually a really good thing to do. If you're doing a darker coat on there, use a lighter color to then pick out any kind of face details you want to, because then it gives that skin that kind of variation that you have with shadows. I then based it. This is just me taking some Vallejo primer that's like that green colored primer and just did the base with that. It's the same exact model technique I have here that I have here. The exact same model technique. Picking out and everything, but this one just has the base color on it. This does not look too bad. I mean, let's just look at the sucker. He's not the best, but he's sure better than walking around with gray plastic. So if you can get it to just look playable on the table, then you've succeeded in your task. This is what you want to go for, that the fact that the miniature is finished to some degree, and that you can actually, it doesn't take too much to do this. I mean, I did all of this just a few hours ago and gave it like an hour to dry. None of this is heavy, hard work. In fact, spraying this, then spraying that, the spray primer can dry in 15 to 30 minutes. This will dry in 30 minutes to an hour. The acrylic paint that gets used, that stuff dries really quick. You can get it done in like 10 or 15 minutes. The ink dries in 10 or 15 minutes. The picking out takes 10 or 15 minutes. None of this takes an exceedingly long time. So my recommendation, make sure you use a light base coat. Now you can, if you want to pick out detail. Metal and base flesh can come secondarily after that. But generally speaking, as long as this is lighter and this is like medium colors, you should be doing good. Then after that, then you use a medium or dark ink and the automatic contrast will just show up. It'll just be a good thing. So if you use a medium or dark ink on top of your light base coat, it automatically essentially does 70% of the paint job for you. The only thing after that is make sure that highlights and details that you put on afterwards, it's best to make sure your highlights and details are either a light color, just like your base coat to cause the contrast, or they're black, because something that's black or extremely close to black is also a really good contrast to a lot of these so-called darker colors. If you have a forest green or a navy blue, oftentimes black is the only thing that will look darker. So you make sure sometimes you'll use black or light. And of course, top it all off with the matte seal, because these inks almost always have like a glossy structure to them, and you don't want that gloss to show up in the miniatures. If you want to put gloss on your miniatures, use a varnish afterwards. The matte seal is just good in general. They're doing really high quality art miniatures, or if you're just trying to make your things basically tabletopable, there you go. This is probably the best technique to get your miniatures painted if you don't care about being a Da Vinci and you just want the things covered. It turns them from being metal models and gray plastic into colored army men. After all, this may not be the best miniature in the world, but this guy can make a showing on the tabletop. He's definitely capable of doing that. So thanks for watching my video, and hopefully you have painted armies soon too.